Technological sovereignty is one of many concepts related to sovereignty that have been emerging in recent years. Among others feature food sovereignty, social sovereignty. There are many new terms that use the term sovereignty, which is quite curious, it's quite interesting. And my argument is that we are actually facing a return of sovereignty at the very center of political debates in this era. After a long time when sovereignty was considered to be a question that was out of sync with a world without borders and without states, in this vision of globalization. And what is sovereignty, actually? I mean, sovereignty is the control of communities over their own territory, over their own destiny, and over their own resources. In a digital era as the one in which we are living, one of these resources, one of these elements of communities' lives is obviously technology. Digital technology we use to communicate with one another every day. And technology is an element that, unfortunately, nowadays is more of an obstacle to sovereignty rather than a weapon for sovereignty. Why is that? Because digital technology is largely controlled by large companies, and in particular the big five: Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. Companies that are corporations that are owned by rich people and controlled by investors, and that therefore limit people's possibility to control their own world. People feel disempowered and alienated by the fact that the companies, the platforms they utilize in everyday life are platforms and companies on whose governance, on whose structure they have no say, that are completely non-democratic. Therefore, technological sovereignty is, in a way, a question mark. It is a question about how we can regain control over the means of communication, the tools we utilize in our everyday life to interact with one another and to communicate with one another. Post-neoliberalism is the new political horizon that emerges after the prolonged agony of neoliberalism. 2008, the financial crisis, was a stroke that was ultimately fatal, but it took a long time actually for neoliberalism to die. Neoliberalism death signs are all around us. We can see them in the defeat of Hillary Clinton, one of the greatest evangelists for neoliberal globalization. We can see that in the radical change of discourse, where nobody dares anymore to proclaim that the free market is the ultimate good. We can see it in the fact that people on both the right and the left, on the new populist right and the new populist left, which have emerged in the aftermath of 2008, are now making political proposals that have nothing to do with the idea of a free market and a self-regulating economy. Economic protectionism, for example, as proposed by both Donald Trump and by Bernie Sanders in the US presidential elections. New demands for protection and security, new demands for sovereignty, as those that have been displayed in the Brexit referendum campaign. We don't know well what the world after neoliberalism is going to be. Neoliberalism is not post-capitalism. Sorry. Post-neoliberalism is not post-capitalism. That is, we're probably heading towards an even worse, more authoritarian and more exploitative form of capitalism. What we know, though, is that the game we are going to play, and we are starting to play, is quite different from the game we played in the neoliberal era. That affects the right and that affects the left. That affects the way in which a new hegemony is constructed and the way in which this new hegemony will be contested. Because under neoliberalism, both the left and the right accepted some common values, some common ideas. They both thought that freedom was the ultimate value. They accepted the same signifier. They assigned to it very different signifiers. For the right was the free market. For the left was the freedom of individuals and communities. And in the new era of post-neoliberalism, the central signifier of political discourse is changing. It is not freedom anymore. It is sovereignty, control, community, security, protection. The right and the left will assign very different meanings to these signifiers, but what matters is that signifiers have changed. Populism is a term that has been used for a long time as a sort of pejorative blanket term to comprise all those phenomena that the neoliberal elites considered irrational, starting from popular discontent at the follies of the free market. It is a term that has also often been used, mostly been used, to describe right-wing phenomena. When people mostly hear about populism, they think about Le Pen, Farage, Lega Nord, Jobbik in Hungary, and such phenomena. Actually, if we look at the history of populism, we will find that populism originates from the political left. It originates from the thought of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. It is developed in the idea of popular sovereignty, which goes on to influence the French Revolution and the great popular movements of the 19th century, including the Chartists in Britain and the Narodniki, or populists, in Russia. It is only actually in the 20th century that populism moves to the right. As the left becomes more and more elitist and anti-populist, it is the right that lays claims to the mantle of popular sovereignty. So populism is actually an ideology that is neither left nor right. It can be both left and right in different occasions, in different historical circumstances. It is an ideology that centers around a demand for sovereignty at times when sovereignty is felt to be in danger. In this historical moment, we are seeing that both right-wing forces and left-wing forces are laying claim to populism. Sanders and Trump, Podemos and Ciudadanos, the Five-Star Movement and Jeremy Corbyn. Formations that are across the political spectrum are laying claim to populism. I would go as far as saying that populism is the new master ideology, the new battlefield in which right-wing forces and left-wing forces will need to play out their battle. After the neoliberal era, we may be entering now a new populist era in which both the left and the right will somehow be partly populist, and in which who manages to interpret best the spirit of populism, the spirit of popular sovereignty, will be the one that wins the political battle and then gets to influence political decisions in this era.